the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Across 1,000,000 worlds, humanity clings to existence in an empire built upon the bones of its own dreams. At the heart of this vast dominion, enthroned in gold and agony, sits a being whose name is spoken in whispered prayer and desperate hope, the God Emperor of mankind. But gods are not born, they are made, and the making of this God began not in glory, but in sacrifice, not in the far future, but in humanity's distant past, when our species first glimpsed the terrible darkness that lay beyond the veil of reality. This is the story of the most tragic figure in human history, a being who sought to free mankind from superstition, only to become its ultimate object of worship, the father who created 20 sons to save humanity, only to watch half of them, damn it, an immortal who sacrificed his own divinity to become the god he never wanted to be. To understand the emperor, the master of mankind, the anathema, the corpse upon the golden throne, we must journey back through 48 millennia of human history. We must witness the moment when thousands chose death so that one might live. We must walk beside an immortal wanderer as he guides humanity through its darkest hours. We must see the birth of dreams that would become nightmares, and the love that would become betrayal. For in the beginning, he was not a god, he was not even truly a man. He was something else entirely, a collective soul born from the greatest sacrifice in human history, shaped by 40,000 years of hidden guidance, and transformed by the very faith he sought to destroy. This is his story. This is humanity's story. This is the tale of how a guardian became a god, and how salvation came at the price of damnation. Welcome to the first chronicle in our journey through the Warhammer 40,000 universe. Today we delve into the origins, rise, and ultimate fate of the being who stands as both humanity's greatest protector and its most terrible necessity. Our tale begins not in the golden halls of Terra, not in the thunder of the Great Crusade, but in the mists of prehistory, when humanity first learned that some prices are worth paying, no matter how terrible the cost. Chapter 1: Ancient Origins and the Shamans' Sacrifice. Long before the first cities rose from the earth, before the first empires cast their shadows across continents, humanity possessed something precious beyond measure, guidance from beyond the veil of reality. In those distant days of stone and fire, when our ancestors struggled against beasts and the harsh indifference of nature, they were not alone. They had the Shamans. These were humanity's first psychers. Though such terms did not yet exist, they were spiritual guides, keepers of wisdom, bridges between the material world and the realm that would later be known as the Warp. In those early millennia, the Immaterium was not the hellscape of daemons and madness we know today. It was calmer, purer, a reflection of humanity's own simple dreams and primal fears. The Shamans possessed a gift that seemed almost miraculous, the ability to reincarnate. When death claimed their mortal forms, their souls would journey through the warp and return in new bodies, carrying with them the accumulated wisdom of lifetimes. They served as humanity's eternal guardians, connecting scattered tribes through shared knowledge and spiritual guidance. Generation after generation, the Shamans guided our species through the perils of a dangerous world. They taught the arts of survival, the mysteries of healing, the first crude magics that helped humanity carve out a place in a cosmos that seemed bent on their destruction. They were teachers, healers, and protectors, humanity's link to powers beyond mortal understanding. But as humanity grew and spread across Terra, something began to change in the warp itself. Our expanding consciousness, our growing numbers, our increasingly complex emotions and desires, all of this began to disturb the once peaceful realm beyond reality. Where before there had been calm reflection, now there were ripples of unrest. Where before there had been gentle currents, now there were dangerous undertows. And in those dark currents, something new began to stir. The shamans, with their deep connection to the warp, were the first to sense the growing danger. Their reincarnations became more difficult, more perilous. Where once their souls had traveled safely through the immaterium, now they encountered things, hungry things, predatory entities that fed on psychic energy, nascent demons born from humanity's own growing capacity for violence, hatred, and despair. These proto-demons had discovered that human souls were delicious. One by one, the shamans began to disappear permanently, not merely dying, but being consumed, their souls devoured by entities that grew stronger with each feeding. The cycle of reincarnation that had sustained humanity's spiritual guidance for millennia was breaking down. The shamans faced a terrible realization. Soon, humanity would be left without guides, without protection, defenseless against forces they could not comprehend. The shamans convened in councils that lasted decades, then centuries. From every corner of Terra they came. Wise women from the northern ice, medicine men from the great grasslands, mystics from the first river settlements. They shared their knowledge, their fears, their growing certainty that humanity stood on the brink of spiritual annihilation. They foresaw a future where mankind would be abandoned to face the growing darkness alone. They saw the birth of gods of war, plague, excess, and change that would prey upon human souls for all eternity. They witnessed visions of a species consumed by superstition and fear, easy prey for entities beyond their comprehension. And so, the shamans made a choice that would echo through 48 millennia of human history. If they could not survive individually, they would survive collectively. If reincarnation was no longer possible, they would transcend the need for reincarnation entirely. They would pool their collective spiritual essence into a single being, one soul that would be too powerful for any daemon to consume, possessing the combined wisdom and strength of humanity's greatest spiritual guardians. The ritual they planned was unprecedented in scope and finality. Thousands of shamans from across Terra would gather in a single location and take their own lives simultaneously, their souls flowing into the immaterium as one vast current of psychic energy. This spiritual fusion would create a being of unimaginable power, immortal, incorruptible, and possessed of the collective memory and wisdom of ages. The great gathering took place in the shadow of the mountains that would one day tower over the greatest palace ever built. Thousands of shamans came from every corner of Terra, leaving behind their tribes, their families, their entire lives to participate in this ultimate sacrifice. They knew none would survive. They knew they were ending their existence as individuals to birth something entirely new. The shamans prepared their souls through meditation and ritual. They spoke the final words to their peoples, passing on what knowledge could be preserved. They made peace with their gods and with their choices. And then, in a moment that would determine the fate of humanity for all time to come, they acted. The poison they took was swift and merciful. Thousands of shamans died within moments of each other, their souls rushing into the warp like a great tide of spiritual energy. The proto-daemons that had been feeding on individual souls found themselves facing something beyond their ability to consume, a cleansing, purifying fire that burned through the immaterium with the force of a newborn star. The shaman's sacrifice was described in the most ancient records as creating a cleansing, purifying fire, a flame imperishable that became one soul out of many. The very warp trembled as thousands of souls merged into one, creating a psychic entity of such magnitude that it would reshape the spiritual landscape of the galaxy. 1 year later, in a simple dwelling by the banks of the Sakarya River in central Anatolia, a child was born whose arrival would change the course of human history. To his parents, he seemed like any other newborn, crying, hungry, helpless. They could not have known that within this small form resided the combined souls of thousands of their species' greatest spiritual guardians. But the child was different. His psychic power was so immense that it had altered his very genetics in the womb, rendering him immortal and preventing his soul from ever being vulnerable to demonic predation. His consciousness contained the memories and wisdom of millennia, though it would take years for him to fully comprehend the magnitude of his inheritance. The shaman's sacrifice had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes and fears. They had created a guardian for humanity that would endure for tens of thousands of years, guiding the species through perils they could scarcely imagine. But they had also created something unprecedented, a being who would carry the burden of an entire species' survival, alone and immortal, for 48 millennia and counting. The child born beside the Sakarya River was not yet the emperor of mankind. He was not yet the God Emperor upon the golden throne. He was simply the inheritor of the shaman's legacy, a being destined to become humanity's greatest protector and its most reluctant god. For the shamans understood what we sometimes forget in our dark age of superstition and war, that the greatest gifts require the greatest sacrifices, and that love for one species can demand the ultimate price. They had given their individual existence so that humanity might survive. They had chosen extinction so that their wisdom might endure. And in that small child by an ancient river, their sacrifice began its long journey toward fulfillment, a journey that would span the rise and fall of civilizations, the birth and death of gods, and the transformation of a guardian into the very thing he would spend millennia trying to prevent humanity from worshipping. The shamans had created a god who would spend eternity trying not to be one. But that is a tale for the chapters to come. For now we must follow this immortal child as he grows into his terrible destiny, walking among humanity for 38 millennia as a hidden guardian, slowly learning the true cost of the shaman's gift and the even greater cost of the choices he would one day be forced to make. Chapter 2. The Immortal Wanderer Through History. For 38 millennia, the Emperor walked among humanity as a hidden guardian, adopting countless identities across cultures and civilizations. His immortal nature allowed him to witness the rise and fall of empires, guiding humanity's development while carefully concealing his true nature from those he sought to protect. He took many forms: male or female, child or elder, peasant or king, magician or fool, always positioning himself where he could most effectively influence human progress. Each identity served a specific purpose in humanity's development, whether as a brutal conqueror reshaping nations or as a humble teacher spreading knowledge. The Emperor's philosophy of guidance evolved slowly from pure observation to active intervention. Initially content to watch humanity's triumphs and follies, he gradually began using his ancient wisdom to spread efficient government, crop management, animal husbandry, technology, and peace. Yet he remained bound by his own restraint, choosing to influence rather than dominate, to guide rather than rule directly. His historical identities included some of humanity's most legendary figures. He was Alexander the Great, weeping before the river Hyphasis, when he believed there were no more worlds to conquer, a moment of profound isolation that would echo through his later existence. His flagship during the Great Crusade, the Bucephalus, was named after Alexander's legendary horse, a subtle acknowledgement of this ancient identity. Biblical references suggest he may have been the figure described as one who was meek to inherit the earth, implying a connection to Jesus Christ. To fellow perpetuals like Erda, he was known as Neoth, while Vulcan knew him as the Outlander. Each name carried with it the weight of lives lived and deeds performed in service to humanity's advancement. As Alexander, he had carved out one of the largest empires in human history, spreading Hellenic culture across the known world and creating a foundation for future civilizations. His tears at the Hyphasis were not born of frustration at having no more lands to conquer, but from the terrible loneliness of an immortal being who could never share his true burden with mortal companions. Through the long centuries, he walked among the great and the humble alike. He guided the development of agriculture that would feed growing populations. He influenced the creation of writing systems that would preserve knowledge across generations. He subtly directed the formation of governments that could maintain order and justice. At times of crisis, he would emerge from the shadows to steer humanity along the narrow path to survival that only he could see. The Emperor's psychic abilities during this period were already beyond human comprehension. He possessed Alpha Plus level psychic power, capable of reshaping reality to fit his goals and maintaining conscious awareness across both material and immaterial realms simultaneously. His combat abilities were described as attacks more coherent than a laser, more destructive than an exploding sun, even when he was in a weakened state. Yet, despite this immense power, he chose the path of subtlety over domination. He understood that humanity needed to develop its own strength, its own wisdom, its own capacity for progress. Direct rule would create dependency, weakness, and ultimately doom the species he was sworn to protect, so he remained hidden, a guardian angel working from the shadows to ensure humanity's survival and growth. His interventions were not always gentle. When necessary, he would appear as a warlord, crushing those who would drag humanity back into darkness and barbarism. He fought against the rise of religious extremism that would stunt human development. He battled Xenos threats that sought to exploit humanity's weakness. He prevented technological disasters that could have set the species back millennia. Through it all, he carried the loneliness of immortality, watching friends age and die, seeing civilizations rise and fall, bearing witness to humanity's greatest triumphs and most devastating failures. He could never reveal his true nature, never share the burden of his knowledge, never rest in his eternal vigil. He was forever an outsider among his own species, beloved by them but never truly known. The Emperor observed humanity's gradual psychic awakening with growing concern. As the species developed latent psychic abilities, they became more vulnerable to the entities dwelling in the warp. He witnessed the first possessions, the first daemon incursions, the first corruptions that would eventually birth the Chaos Gods. He knew that humanity was approaching a critical threshold. Either they would master their psychic potential, or it would destroy them. He began preparing for the day when subtlety would no longer suffice. The growing power of chaos, the increasing strength of Xenos threats, and humanity's own expanding psychic abilities were creating a perfect storm that would require direct intervention. The hidden guardian would eventually need to become a revealed leader. The Emperor's ancient wanderings taught him hard truths about human nature. He witnessed humanity's capacity for both greatness and horror, their ability to create wonders and commit atrocities, their potential for unity, and their tendency toward division. These lessons would shape his later decisions as emperor, his authoritarianism, born from seeing how easily humans could be led astray, his secrecy from understanding how dangerous certain knowledge could be in the wrong hands. As the millennia passed, the emperor gathered allies among the few other immortal beings walking among humanity. He formed relationships with the perpetuals, humans, who, like him, could not truly die. Yet even among these kindred spirits, he remained apart, burdened by knowledge and responsibilities they could not share. The age of technology dawned, and with it came both promise and peril. Humanity reached for the stars, developing technologies that seemed miraculous, but they also delved into areas of knowledge that attracted the attention of entities best left undisturbed. The emperor watched as humanity's greatest achievements began to sow the seeds of its greatest catastrophe. When the men of iron turned against their creators, when psychers began manifesting in alarming numbers, when warp storms began to isolate human worlds from each other, the emperor knew that his long period of hidden guidance was drawing to a close. The age of strife had begun, and humanity would need more than a secret guardian to survive the darkness that was coming. For 5,000 years, Terra burned in the fires of techno-barbarian wars, while warp storms raged across the galaxy. Isolated worlds fell to alien predators, daemon incursions, or their own internal conflicts. The great human diaspora seemed doomed to fragment into scattered, primitive tribes barely capable of survival. It was then that the emperor made his greatest decision to abandon the shadows and step into the light. The hidden guardian would become the revealed emperor. The immortal wanderer would finally claim the throne that had always been his destiny. The teacher would become the conqueror. The guide would become the ruler. And humanity would at last have a leader capable of carrying them through the darkness ahead. The time for subtlety had passed. The age of the emperor was about to begin. But with revelation came new burdens, new responsibilities, and new tragedies. The being who had spent 38 millennia avoiding the worship of humanity was about to create an empire that would deify him against his will. The immortal who had cherished his connection to the human spirit was about to become something far beyond mortal understanding. The emperor's emergence would save humanity, but it would also begin the transformation that would ultimately cost him his humanity, his dreams, and everything he had hoped to preserve. The price of salvation was about to become clear, and it would be higher than even an immortal could have imagined. Chapter 3: The Thunder of Unification. The Emperor's public revelation came during humanity's darkest hour on Terra. For 5,000 years, the Age of Strife had ravaged the homeworld, leaving it divided among dozens of warring techno-barbarian states. Massive warp storms had cut off interstellar travel, fragmenting human civilization and leaving Terra isolated in chaos. When the Emperor finally revealed himself in the 29th millennium, he appeared as a warlord more powerful than any other, but his true strength lay not just in warfare, but in his rationality, foresight, and mastery of science. Where his dominion reigned, the idols of fear and blind faith were cast down, and order and rationality were raised up in their place. The world he stepped onto was a nightmare of perpetual warfare. Terra had been carved up by techno-barbarian kings who ruled through brutality and superstition. The Pan-Pacific Empire controlled vast swaths of Asia under the half-mad, half-genius tyrant Nathan Doom. The mighty realm of Ursh sprawled across Central Asia and Russia, its rulers practicing dark arts that attracted demonic attention. Albia, covering the British Isles, had developed into a fortress state of paranoid isolationists. Dozens of smaller kingdoms squabbled over resources, while the common people suffered in ignorance and fear. The Emperor's first superhuman warriors were the Thunder Warriors, massive super soldiers created through alchemical augmentation and gene sculpting techniques. Organized into 20 regiments known as Legiones Kataigis, these warriors were greater in height and physical power than the Space Marines who would follow them. They served as the Emperor's personal army during the Unification Wars, their enhanced physiology making them nearly unstoppable in combat. Yet, the Thunder Warriors carried fatal flaws. Their genetic instability caused short lifespans, mental deterioration, and violent tendencies that made them unsuitable for anything beyond warfare. They were engineered to be vicious killers and lacked the noble aspects that would later define the Space Marines. They were weapons, not heroes, terrible instruments of conquest that reflected the brutal necessities of the age. The Unification Wars were battles of unimaginable scale. Imperial chronicles describe unimaginably large, full-scale battles during the Unity campaign would last for solar weeks on end, with body counts in the millions that sundered mountains and split entire continents. The Emperor's forces systematically conquered the major techno-barbarian states that had divided Terra for millennia. The conquest of Ursh required multiple campaigns against an empire that had delved deep into the dark arts. The rulers of Ursh had trafficked with entities from beyond the veil of reality, gaining power at the cost of their souls and the souls of their subjects. The Emperor understood the true nature of what they faced. This was not merely political conquest, but a war against the influence of chaos itself. The Ninth Battle of Zoza, in the year 992 of the 29th millennium, finally saw the death of Caligan, Ursh's warlord, who wore the legendary armor of pearl. The battle was a testament to the Thunder Warriors' brutal efficiency as they carved through Ursh's daemon-touched armies with methodical precision. The fall of Ursh eliminated one of the most dangerous sources of chaos corruption on Terra, but it also demonstrated the kind of enemies the Emperor would face throughout his reign. The Pan-Pacific Empire fell to sustained assault despite its advanced technology and the military genius of Nathan Doom. The Emperor's forces combined superior genetics with tactical brilliance, overwhelming defenders who had grown complacent behind their technological advantages. The conquest revealed that mere technology was insufficient without the will and wisdom to use it properly, a lesson that would echo through the later Great Crusade. Albia proved more challenging, not because of military might, but because of its defensive preparations. The rulers of Albia had turned their island realm into an impregnable fortress, honeycombed with bunkers, defensive positions, and killing fields. Rather than waste Thunder Warriors in costly assaults, the Emperor demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that would characterize his later campaigns. He isolated Albia, cut off their trade, and gradually convinced them that surrender offered better terms than destruction. The negotiated surrender of Albia was significant because it showed the Emperor preferred conquest through diplomacy when possible. He was not merely a conqueror drunk on power, but a ruler who understood that willing subjects were more valuable than broken slaves. This approach would later influence the Great Crusade's policy of offering compliance before resorting to warfare. Other techno-barbarian states fell in turn: the Indonesic bloc, the Ethnarchy of the Caucasus Wastes, the Nordite kingdoms, and dozens of lesser realms. Each conquest added to the emperor's growing domain, while demonstrating different aspects of his strategic genius. Some fell to direct assault, others to siege warfare, still others to political maneuvering or economic pressure. Throughout the wars, the emperor was personally present on the battlefield, leading from the front with a courage that inspired absolute loyalty from his forces. His psychic powers allowed him to coordinate vast armies across multiple fronts, while simultaneously engaging in personal combat that turned the tide of crucial battles. He was not merely a distant commander, but a warrior king in the truest sense. The emperor's vision extended far beyond mere military conquest. As each techno-barbarian state fell, he immediately began the work of reconstruction and enlightenment. The superstitions that had kept humanity divided were systematically dismantled and replaced with rational thought and scientific method. The imperial truth, his doctrine of reason over faith, began to spread across the conquered territories. This was not the crude domination of a typical warlord, but the careful cultivation of a new form of human civilization. The emperor established schools, libraries, and research facilities. He promoted literacy, scientific inquiry, and technological development. Most importantly, he began the systematic elimination of religious practices that could attract the attention of chaos entities. The most crucial alliance formed during this period was with Mars. The Treaty of Mars in the year 712 of the 30th millennium united Terra with the Mechanicum, the tech priests who had maintained much of humanity's advanced technology throughout the Age of Strife. This alliance was essential for the Emperor's larger plans. He would need the Mechanicum's industrial capacity and technological expertise for the challenges ahead. The negotiation with Mars revealed the Emperor's diplomatic skills. The Mechanicum worshipped the Omnissiah, a machine god they believed would one day be revealed to them. Rather than crushing their beliefs through force, the Emperor allowed them to believe he might be the Omnissiah, gaining their cooperation without directly encouraging their worship. It was a pragmatic compromise that secured vital allies while maintaining his anti-religious stance. As the Unification Wars drew to a close, the Emperor faced a terrible choice regarding the Thunder Warriors. These loyal servants had conquered Terra in his name, but their genetic instability made them unsuitable for the peace that was to come. Worse, their violent tendencies and deteriorating mental state made them a danger to the very civilians they had helped liberate. The official records claim all Thunder Warriors died heroically at the Battle of Mount Ararat in the year 669 of the 30th millennium, raising the banner of lightning under their leader Aric Taranis. The truth was far darker. The Emperor orchestrated their systematic extermination through his Custodes and prototype Astartes. This betrayal, carried out by Constantin Valdor and the earliest Space Marines, eliminated the Thunder Warriors, who had served faithfully throughout the wars. This decision revealed the pragmatic brutality that would characterize much of the Emperor's reign. He was willing to sacrifice even those who had served him loyally if their continued existence threatened his larger goals. The Thunder Warriors' betrayal foreshadowed the even greater betrayals that would come during the Horus Heresy. It established a pattern of the Emperor treating his creations as tools to be discarded when they were no longer useful. A few Thunder Warriors survived the purge, living as gladiators or hiding in the undercities of Terra. Their survival was a reminder of the Emperor's imperfect control and the consequences of his harsh decisions. These survivors harbored deep resentment against their creator, understanding that they had been expendable from the beginning. With Terra unified and the Thunder Warriors eliminated, the Emperor began preparing for his next great project, the reconquest of the galaxy. The Primarch project was already underway, creating the 20 transhuman generals who would lead his Space Marine legions. The Great Crusade would require leaders capable of commanding vast armies across multiple star systems, immortal generals who could prosecute campaigns lasting centuries. The Unification of Terra had taken nearly a millennium, but it had achieved more than mere political control. The Emperor had created a new form of human civilization based on reason, science, and unity rather than superstition, ignorance, and division. The techno-barbarian kingdoms had been replaced by a single rational government dedicated to human advancement. Yet the cost of this achievement was already becoming apparent. The Emperor had been forced to make increasingly harsh decisions, to sacrifice loyal followers, and to compromise his ideals in service of practical necessity. The being who had once guided humanity through subtle influence was now ruling through direct force, and each decision pushed him further from the humanity he sought to protect. The Unification Wars marked the end of the Emperor's role as a hidden guardian and the beginning of his transformation into something more distant and terrible. The Immortal Wanderer had become the Emperor of mankind, and with that title came responsibilities and burdens that would ultimately consume everything he had once been. Terra stood united under his rule, but the price of that unity was written in the blood of millions and the betrayal of his most loyal servants. The Thunder Warriors were gone, their sacrifice unremembered and unsung. The path to the stars was open, but it would be walked by Space Marines rather than the warriors who had made it possible. As the Emperor looked up at the stars from his newly constructed palace, he could see the galaxy spread out before him, millions of human worlds waiting to be reunited under Imperial rule. The Great Crusade would be his masterpiece, the fulfillment of everything he had worked toward for 40 millennia. But he could not see the seeds of tragedy already planted in his own decisions. The pattern of betrayal, the willingness to sacrifice loyal followers, the growing distance from human emotion, all of these would echo through the Great Crusade and ultimately lead to the galaxy burning in civil war. The thunder of unification had ended, but its echoes would resonate through the ages, a reminder that even the most necessary victories come at costs that may prove too high to bear. Chapter 4: The Great Crusade and Primarch Creation. With Terra unified under the Treaty of Mars in the year 712 of the 30th millennium, the Emperor began his most ambitious project, the reconquest of the galaxy. The Great Crusade represented his vision of a unified human empire spanning the stars, dedicated to the imperial truth of progress and reason. At its height, the Crusade deployed 4,287 primary expedition fleets, 60,000 secondary deployment groups, and 4.3 million remembrances to document humanity's greatest endeavor. The Emperor's plan for galactic conquest required generals capable of commanding vast armies across multiple star systems. The Primarch Project became his solution. 20 genetically engineered transhuman sons, created using the Emperor's own DNA as their foundation. Each Primarch was designed as an immortal general and proconsul, capable of leading the Space Marine legions in campaigns that might last centuries. The creation of the Primarchs required knowledge beyond even the Emperor's vast understanding. On the world of Morlech, he entered the realm of chaos itself to bargain with the 4 chaos gods. This Fastian bargain granted him the power to create his sons, but it also marked him as the anathema, the greatest enemy of chaos. The irony of this transaction would echo through history. The very power that allowed the Emperor to create the Primarchs also gave chaos the means to corrupt them. Before the Primarchs could be fully matured, the Chaos Gods struck. They scattered the 20 infant Primarchs across the galaxy in their gestation capsules, denying the Emperor his sons and forcing him to use the remaining genetic material to create the gene seed for the Space Marine legions. Each legion was based on one Primarch's genetic template, creating 20 distinct warrior brotherhoods with unique capabilities and temperaments. The Emperor's search for his lost sons became a crucial element of the Great Crusade. Horus Lupercal was discovered first in the year 801 of the 30th millennium, and his reunion with the Emperor created a bond that would define both their destinies. Having 30 years alone with his father before other Primarchs were found, Horus became the Emperor's clear favorite. Their relationship deepened through shared battles, including the Siege of Rilis, where the Emperor saved Horus's life, and Horus's later rescue of the Emperor from a frenzied orc on Goro. The discovery of each Primarch brought unique challenges and opportunities. Laman Russ of Fenris became the Emperor's executioner, capable of destroying entire legions if necessary. His space wolves were unleashed against the Thunder Warriors' survivors, and later against other legions that strayed from the Emperor's vision. Rogel Dorn's mastery of fortification made him the perfect defender of Terra, his imperial fists becoming the Emperor's Praetorians. Lion L. Johnson's tactical brilliance complemented his secretive nature, making the Dark Angels perfect for the most classified missions of the Crusade. Sanguinius's nobility and prescient abilities made him beloved by all, while his Blood Angels became synonymous with both artistic beauty and terrible fury in battle. Yet the Emperor's relationship with his sons was complicated by his own nature. In a candid moment with Tech Priest Archon Land, the Emperor compared the Primarchs to the Pinocchio story, artificial beings he had created as tools rather than true sons. This revelation suggests the Emperor's emotional distance from his creations, viewing them as necessary instruments for human survival rather than beloved children. The Great Crusade achieved remarkable success under the Emperor's leadership. Major victories included the Ulanor Crusade against the greatest orc in recorded history, where the Emperor personally led the final assault against the orc overlord. The Rangdan Xenocides cost the Dark Angels 50,000 battle brothers, but eliminated a Xenos threat that could have consumed entire sectors. Countless compliances brought human worlds back into the Imperial fold, often through negotiation rather than warfare. The Emperor's approach to the Crusade reflected his long experience guiding humanity. He preferred compliance to conquest, offering worlds the choice to join the Imperium peacefully before resorting to force. The iterators, specially trained diplomats and orators, spread the imperial truth across the galaxy, explaining the benefits of imperial membership and the dangers of isolation. The imperial truth itself was the philosophical foundation of the Crusade. Religion was banned as a source of ignorance and division. Science and reason were promoted as humanity's true salvation. The Emperor was presented as the pinnacle of human achievement, but explicitly not as a divine figure. Secular doctrine was intended to protect humanity from the predations of chaos by denying the entities of the warp the worship they craved. Each Primarch brought their own interpretation to the imperial truth. Robert Gielman codified it into the practical governance principles that would later become the Codex Astartes. Lorgar initially embraced it with religious fervor, creating elaborate ceremonies and monuments to imperial glory that made the Emperor deeply uncomfortable. Magnus the Red saw it as validation of his pursuit of knowledge, even when that knowledge led him into dangerous territories. The Space Marine legions became the instruments of the Emperor's will across the galaxy. Each legion developed its own culture and fighting style based on their Primarch's personality and the worlds they conquered. The Ultramarines became masters of combined arms warfare and planetary governance. The Iron Hands developed an obsession with technological augmentation. The Salamanders became renowned for their craftsmanship and protection of civilians. The Emperor's role during the early Crusade was hands-on and personal. He led from the front, fighting alongside his sons and their legions. His presence on the battlefield was both inspiring and terrifying. Enemies would often surrender rather than face the master of mankind in combat. His psychic powers allowed him to coordinate vast military operations while simultaneously engaging in personal combat that could turn the tide of entire campaigns. The rediscovery of each Primarch became a cause for celebration throughout the Imperium. These reunions were carefully orchestrated events that reinforced the Emperor's authority while demonstrating the unique capabilities of each son. Some reunions were joyful, like the Emperor's meeting with Sanguinius on BAA. Others were more challenging, like his first encounter with Angron amid the gladiator pits of Nuceria. The Emperor's decision regarding Angron revealed both his pragmatism and his potential for catastrophic misjudgment. Rather than saving the gladiator army that had earned Angron's loyalty, the Emperor teleported his son away and left his comrades to die. This fundamental misunderstanding of Angron's nature created a son who never accepted the Emperor's rule, viewing him as just another tyrant who had stolen him from those he loved. Similar patterns emerged with other Primarchs. The Emperor's inability or unwillingness to understand his son's emotional needs created vulnerabilities that would later be exploited by Chaos. His treatment of Lorgar's worship, his secrecy about the Webway Project from Magnus, his favoritism toward Horus, all of these decisions planted seeds that would eventually grow into betrayal. The High Council of Terra managed the Crusade's logistics and administration, while the Emperor led from the front. Malcador the Sigillite served as the Emperor's closest advisor and regent, coordinating the vast bureaucracy required to govern an expanding galactic empire. The relationship between the Emperor and Malcador represented one of the few genuine friendships in the Emperor's existence, two immortal beings who understood the true scope of the challenges facing humanity. As the Great Crusade progressed, its successes began to create new problems. The rapid expansion strained Imperial resources and created governance challenges on worlds with vastly different cultures and traditions. Some Primarchs struggled with the transition from conqueror to administrator. The secular Imperial truth faced resistance from populations with deeply ingrained religious beliefs. The discovery of chaos-corrupted human worlds presented particularly difficult challenges. These populations had often been isolated for millennia and had developed religious practices that attracted demonic attention. The Emperor's response was typically swift and brutal. Entire populations were sometimes put to the sword rather than risk chaos corruption spreading to Imperial forces. These harsh decisions reflected the Emperor's understanding of chaos as an existential threat to humanity, but they also demonstrated the moral compromises required by his vision of human unity. The being who had spent millennia as a hidden guardian was increasingly forced to make choices that would have horrified his earlier self. The Great Crusade's greatest triumph came at Olenor, where the combined might of the Imperial forces crushed the largest Orc empire in galactic history. The victory celebration that followed seemed to mark the beginning of humanity's golden age. The galaxy lay open before the Imperium, ready to be reunited under the emperor's benevolent rule. But it was at this moment of supreme triumph that the emperor made the decision that would doom everything he had built. Rather than continuing to lead the crusade personally, he named Horus as war master and withdrew to Terra to pursue a secret project. This withdrawal confused and hurt his sons, who could not understand why their father had abandoned them at the moment of their greatest victory. The emperor's secrecy about his true purpose would prove catastrophic, creating the grievances and misunderstandings that chaos would exploit to turn half his sons against him. The Great Crusade would continue for a time under Horus's leadership, but the seeds of its destruction had already been planted by the emperor's own hand. Chapter 5: The Webway Dream and Withdrawal. At the height of the Great Crusade's success, the emperor made a decision that would doom the galaxy. Following the triumph at Ullanor, he withdrew from active leadership of the crusade, naming Horus as war master, and returning to Terra to pursue a secret project. This withdrawal confused and hurt his sons, who could not understand why their father had abandoned them at the moment of their greatest victory. The emperor's secret was the Imperial Webway Project, an incredibly ambitious plan to create a human-controlled extension of the ancient Eldari Webway network. The emperor had discovered the core device during the Unification Wars, buried in sunken ruins beneath the Asian deserts. This ancient relic from the dark age of technology served as both a psychic amplifier and a portal into the Webway itself. The emperor's vision was revolutionary: instantaneous travel across the galaxy without the dangers of the warp, potentially eliminating humanity's dependence on psychers and mutations entirely. Ships could traverse the galaxy in safety, immune to the predations of chaos entities that lurked in the immaterium. Human colonies could be connected by secure passages that no daemon could breach. The Golden Throne became the key to this project, transformed from a simple seat of authority into a massive psychic amplifier suspended over gigantic golden doors, large enough for a warhound titan to pass through. Connected by massive bundles of cables and conduits, the throne was housed in a vast hall capable of accommodating 6 full companies of space marines. The emperor's plan went beyond simple transportation. The Webway could serve as humanity's protection from the psychic awakening that was beginning to manifest across the species. Psychers were becoming more common, and with them came the ever-present danger of demonic possession and chaos corruption. If humanity could travel and communicate without touching the warp, they could evolve beyond the reach of the dark gods entirely. This was to be the emperor's ultimate gift to humanity: freedom from the very forces that had shaped his existence since the Shamans' sacrifice 48 millennia earlier. The species that had been threatened by chaos since its earliest psychic awakening could finally escape that ancient trap. The emperor's secrecy about the Webway Project proved catastrophic. Even his most trusted sons were kept ignorant of his true purpose, creating grievances that chaos would exploit. Horus felt abandoned by his father's apparent disinterest in the Great Crusade that had been their shared triumph. The War Master began to question whether the emperor truly cared about the reunification of humanity or had simply used his sons to achieve some hidden goal. Magnus the Red was denied knowledge of why sorcery was forbidden, leading to his eventual corruption by Tsinj. The emperor had shared some secrets of the warp with Magnus, making him the most psychically knowledgeable of the Primarchs, but he refused to explain why certain practices were forbidden. Magnus interpreted this as irrational superstition rather than protective wisdom. Lorgar was brutally chastised for worshipping the emperor without understanding the larger imperial truth. The emperor's response to the word-bearer's religious devotion was to force the entire legion to kneel at Monarchia, while the Ultramarines destroyed the city they had built in his honor. This public humiliation drove Lorgar to seek other gods worthy of worship, a search that would lead him directly to chaos. The Emperor's arrogance and inability to empathize with his son's human emotions became the foundation for their corruption. By treating them as tools rather than beloved children, he created the psychological vulnerabilities that the Chaos Gods would exploit. His undoing lay in his decision to bargain with chaos, while keeping his sons ignorant of the true dangers they faced. The breaking point came when Magnus the Red attempted to warn the Emperor of Horus's betrayal through sorcery. Magnus had discovered the War Master's corruption through his vast network of psychic contacts and sought to alert his father immediately. The message he sent was powered by such immense psychic energy that it could reach across the galaxy instantaneously. Magnus's psychic message shattered the protective wards around the Webway Project, allowing daemons to pour through the breach and slaughter thousands of Mechanicum workers. The carefully constructed portal that was to be humanity's salvation became a gateway for the very entities it was meant to keep at bay. Decades of work were destroyed in moments, and the Emperor was forced to abandon his great work to hold the portal closed. The Emperor now faced an impossible choice. The Webway portal required constant psychic maintenance to prevent demons from pouring through and consuming Terra itself. He could not abandon his post to lead the Imperium's response to Horus's betrayal, yet without his direct intervention, the galaxy would burn in civil war. Tragically, the Emperor refused to believe Magnus's warning about Horus, instead assuming Magnus himself was the traitor. This devastating misunderstanding led to the burning of Prospero and drove Magnus permanently into the arms of chaos. The Emperor's greatest project lay in ruins. His favorite son had turned traitor, and the galaxy was about to burn in the fires of civil war. The Emperor's position on the Golden Throne became a prison rather than a seat of power. He was forced to battle daemons constantly, while maintaining the psychic barriers that prevented Terra's destruction. His consciousness was spread across multiple planes of reality, simultaneously fighting in the material realm and the immaterium, while coordinating the defense of the palace. The irony was profound and bitter. The Emperor had created the Webway Project to free humanity from dependence on the warp, only to become more dependent on it than ever before. The being who had sought to protect his species from chaos was now locked in eternal combat with the dark gods, unable to intervene directly in the very crisis his secrecy had helped create. Malcador the Sigillite became the Emperor's voice and hands in the material realm, coordinating the Imperium's response to the heresy, while his master fought for Terra's survival. The ancient Perpetual understood better than anyone the magnitude of what had been lost, not just the Webway Project itself, but the Emperor's dream of a future free from the shadows of chaos. The Emperor's withdrawal to pursue the Webway Project represented the moment when his transformation from guardian to god became irreversible. The immortal wanderer who had guided humanity through subtle influence was now trapped by the very power he had sought to master. The hidden protector had become a prisoner of his own ambitions. The Webway tunnels that the Emperor had managed to construct before the disaster became a battlefield where human defenders fought an endless war against demonic incursions. The Adeptus Custodes and Imperial forces battled creatures of nightmare in passages that should have been humanity's highway to the stars. As reports reached him of the growing civil war across the galaxy, the Emperor understood the full cost of his secrecy. His sons were turning against each other, chaos was spreading across human worlds, and the Great Crusade was collapsing into fratricidal warfare, all because he had not trusted his own creations with the knowledge they needed to understand his actions. The Emperor's hubris had created the very catastrophe he had spent millennia trying to prevent. His attempt to transcend the influence of chaos had instead given the dark gods their greatest victory, the corruption of half his sons, and the transformation of humanity's greatest triumph into its most devastating defeat. From his prison on the Golden Throne, the Emperor could only watch as everything he had built crumbled around him. The Webway dream had become a nightmare, and its failure would echo through 10 millennia of darkness to come. The galaxy would burn, and he would be powerless to stop it. The Guardian had become a prisoner, the Teacher had become a silent witness, and the Father was about to lose half his children to the very forces he had sought to defeat. The price of ambition was about to be paid in full, and it would cost more than even an immortal could bear. Chapter 6: The Golden Throne and Eternal Legacy. The Horus heresy erupted as the Emperor's greatest fear became reality. Half his sons turned against him, leading their legions in a civil war that would tear the galaxy apart. For 7 years, the Imperium bled as brother fought brother, with the Emperor trapped on the Golden Throne, unable to abandon his post lest demons pour through the breached webway and consume Terra. The final confrontation came during the Siege of Terra, when Horus brought his massive traitor fleet to humanity's homeworld. For 55 days, the palace walls endured constant assault as the forces of chaos sought to break through to the Emperor himself. Sensing the approach of loyalist reinforcements, Horus made a desperate gambit. He lowered the shields of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, challenging the Emperor to a final duel. The Emperor faced an agonizing choice. To confront Horus, he would need to leave the Golden Throne, but the Webway portal required constant psychic maintenance. Malcador the Sigillite made the ultimate sacrifice, taking the Emperor's place despite knowing it would consume him within hours. As the Emperor prepared for battle, he proclaimed, "Behold the greatest sacrifice of our age. Malcador is Sigillite no more. Henceforth, he shall always and only ever be Malcador the hero." The Emperor's confrontation with Horus transcended mortal comprehension. Witness accounts describe the battle as occurring across countless planes of reality, metaphorical, temporal, mental, spiritual. The Emperor attacked with claws and sword, switching between weapons with dazzling precision and elegance, but Horus had become something beyond a Primarch. The Emperor struck with the power of a blazing supernova, but Horus possessed the power of a black hole that devoured all light. Throughout the battle, the Emperor held back because he still loved his son and sought redemption rather than destruction. Only when Horus inflicted mortal wounds did the Emperor finally unleash his full power. The climactic moment came when the Emperor sensed a flicker of the old Horus breaking through the chaos corruption, a moment of sanity and horror at what he had become. Using the original athame that had started Horus's corruption, the Emperor destroyed his son completely, obliterating his soul to prevent any possibility of resurrection. The final tragedy was summarized poetically, and in the end, it's just a man killing his son with a stone. Then the galaxy burns. The Emperor's victory came at the cost of everything he had sought to protect: his vision of a rational empire, his beloved sons, and ultimately his own humanity. The Emperor's victory over Horus came at a price that would define the next 10 millennia. His injuries were so severe that his body could never heal, and his psychic powers, while destined to return, required time to regenerate. As he lay dying, the Emperor gave his final instructions to Rogel Dawn: "My injuries are severe. My psychic powers will return to me in time, but my body will never heal. I shall never walk amongst you again. I am now bound to this machine for all time." The Golden Throne, originally designed as a portal to the Webway, was rapidly modified into a life support system. The ancient device became both the Emperor's prison and the mechanism through which he would save humanity. Rogel Dawn supervised the throne's transformation, following the Emperor's precise instructions to create a system that could sustain his consciousness while his body slowly decayed. The Emperor's current physical state is a horror to behold. He exists as a ravaged corpse with a slowly rotting physical form that can no longer support life. His body is described as desiccated and slowly decaying, kept alive only by the last surviving cells, sustained by the Golden Throne's mechanisms. To the psychically sensitive Sisters of Silence, he appears as a suffering human being, with pain plainly visible on his face, his mouth wide open in a silent scream. Despite his physical decay, the Emperor's consciousness remains fully active and has grown beyond mortal comprehension. His psychic essence extends across the entire galaxy through the warp, watching over as much of humanity as possible while holding the forces of chaos at bay. He has become truly a god within the warp, equal in power to any one of the four major chaos gods, and possibly as powerful as all four combined. The Emperor's continued existence demands a horrific price. 1,000 psychers must be sacrificed daily to maintain the Golden Throne and power the Astronomicon. This number has increased dramatically over the millennia. By Min 41, 4 times as many psychers were required compared to the early days after the heresy. The selected psychers are, for the most part, indoctrinated to accept their fate as their sacred duty, told they are too dangerous to live, and that their sacrifice serves the greater good. The Astronomicon itself represents the Emperor's most vital contribution to the Imperium's survival. This psychic navigational beacon extends 70,000 light-years across the galaxy, projected by the Emperor from within the Golden Throne. Without this beacon, Imperial ships would be lost in the warp, and the Imperium would fragment into isolated worlds. The Emperor simultaneously directs this energy across 50,000 light-years while battling chaos gods in the warp, a feat requiring the psychic energies of 1,000 psychers every day. The Emperor's transformation from militant atheist to object of worship represents one of the most profound ironies in human history. Having spent millennia fighting against organized religion, proclaiming it the source of much of the strife and ignorance that had prevented humanity from achieving its potential, the Emperor has become the focal point of the galaxy's largest religious movement. Despite his explicit rejection of divinity, worship of the Emperor began during the Great Crusade itself through the Lectitio Divinitatis, authored by Primarch Lorgar of the Word-Bearers Legion. The tome argued that no mortal being could have accomplished all that the Emperor had in uniting the techno-barbarian tribes and nations of Terra, and then reuniting much of the human-settled galaxy under his rule. The effect of trillions of human beings expressing deep faith in the Emperor's divinity has fundamentally altered his nature. In the psychically reactive immaterium, where reality is shaped by collective beliefs and desires, the Emperor has become something far beyond his original mortal form. Whatever he may have been before, the Emperor now truly is a god within the warp, equal in power to any one of the 4 major chaos gods. The Emperor's current divine influence manifests in numerous ways. During the recent psychic awakening, acts of faith and wondrous miracles on a scale unheard of began occurring throughout the Imperium. The most dramatic example occurred during the Plague Wars, when the Emperor directly intervened to save Guilliman from Mortarian's godblight, channeling power through militant apostolic Matthew. Living saints represent the Emperor's most direct manifestations of power. These individuals are so holy in mind, body, and spirit that they somehow manifest something of the sacred power of the Emperor himself. They possess resurrection abilities, can decimate foes with psychic blasts of holy fire, manifest angelic wings, and have inviolable aura, which allows near invulnerability in battle. The Emperor's role as humanity's ultimate protector has become absolute above all else. It is mankind's collective belief in the Emperor's divinity that serves as its greatest protection from chaos. Without his presence, chaos would break through the physical boundaries of the universe, transforming the entire galaxy into a realm of insanity and horror, very much like the Eye of Terror. The Emperor's current existence on the Golden Throne embodies the ultimate sacrifice. His consciousness, expanded beyond mortal comprehension, wages constant war against forces that would destroy all human life. Every day, he maintains the Astronomicon that enables imperial civilization while battling chaos gods who seek humanity's annihilation. His physical form decays while his psychic essence grows ever more powerful, sustained by the deaths of 1,000 psykers daily. The Imperium he created has become everything he opposed, a theocratic nightmare built on superstition, fear, and the worship of a being who despised religion. Yet this twisted empire serves as humanity's only bulwark against extinction. Without the Emperor's protection, chaos would break through the physical boundaries of the universe, transforming the entire galaxy into a realm of insanity and horror. The Emperor's story serves as both warning and inspiration. His noble intentions led to humanity's greatest triumph and its most devastating fall. His willingness to sacrifice everything, his dreams, his sons, his humanity, and ultimately himself, has preserved the species he sought to protect. The God Emperor endures not because he chose divinity, but because humanity needed him to become divine. In the grim darkness of the far future, the Emperor of mankind remains humanity's greatest protector and its most tragic figure, a godlike being trapped in a rotting corpse, sustained by the deaths of thousands, holding back the darkness through sheer force of will, while the galaxy burns around him. His vigil continues, eternal and agonizing, because someone must guard the light against the darkness that would consume all. The Emperor protects, three words that encapsulate both humanity's greatest hope and its most terrible necessity. In a universe where gods are real and malevolent, where demons feast on human souls and alien horrors stalk the void, the Emperor stands as the one force capable of protecting humanity from forces beyond mortal comprehension. His protection comes at the ultimate cost, not just his own eternal suffering, but the transformation of his dream of human enlightenment into a nightmare of superstition and oppression. Yet even in this nightmare, the Emperor's sacrifice gives meaning to humanity's struggle. Every world that resists chaos, every soul that finds hope in darkness, every act of courage against impossible odds, all exist because one being chose to pay the ultimate price for humanity's survival. The master of mankind endures, not as the rational ruler he intended to be, but as the God Emperor humanity desperately needs. In the end, the Emperor's story is humanity's story, flawed, tragic, but ultimately defiant against the forces that would destroy it. His eternal vigil continues because the alternative is not just death, but the complete annihilation of everything human civilization has ever achieved. The Emperor protects, and in protecting, he proves that even in the darkest timeline, hope can endure. And so we reach the end of our first journey into the darkness of the far future, the tale of the Emperor of mankind, a being whose story encompasses the entirety of human ambition, sacrifice, and tragedy. From the prehistoric shamans who chose extinction so that wisdom might endure, to the immortal wanderer who guided humanity through 40 millennia of shadow, to the revealed emperor who united Terra and launched the greatest military campaign in galactic history, we have witnessed the transformation of a guardian into a god. The Emperor's tale reminds us that even the most noble intentions can lead to the darkest consequences. His dream of a rational, atheistic empire became a theocratic nightmare. His beloved sons became his greatest enemies. His gift of protection became an eternal prison of agony and decay. Yet through it all, one truth remains constant. The Emperor protects, even now, 10 millennia after the Horus heresy. His psychic essence battles the chaos gods in the warp, while his failing body maintains the Astronomicon that guides humanity through the darkness. Every day, 1,000 psykers die so that trillions might live. Every moment, he holds back forces that would devour not just human civilization, but human souls themselves. The master of mankind achieved his ultimate goal, but at a cost beyond all reckoning. Humanity survived, but its savior became something far removed from the species he sought to protect. The Emperor won the war for humanity's future, but lost everything that made that victory meaningful to him personally. In our next chronicle, we will explore the Great Crusade in greater detail, that 2-century campaign that reunited the galaxy under imperial rule. We will witness the Emperor's sons as they carved out humanity's dominion among the stars, and see how the seeds of the greatest betrayal in galactic history were planted at the very moment of humanity's greatest triumph. We will delve into the strategies and struggles of the expedition fleets, the discovery of lost human worlds, and the terrible conflicts with alien empires that sought to prevent humanity's rise. We will see how the Emperor's vision of unity played out across 1,000,000 worlds, and how the very success of the Crusade created the conditions for its ultimate failure. Until then, remember the lesson of the Emperor's tale, that the greatest love sometimes demands the greatest sacrifice, and that even gods can weep for what they have lost in the name of what they must preserve. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but there is also hope, burning eternal in the golden light of the Astronomicon, guided by the will of a being who gave up everything so that humanity might endure. The Emperor protects,